Trevor Lawrence got a contract extension. 5 years, $275 million, $55 million per year, $142 million as signing, and $200 million guaranteed. How do we feel about this? I feel like Trevor Lawrence is a very polarizing quarterback.
He is.
Because some people look at his stats and they think that he's terrible. He hasn't lived up to his name. He's not generational. He's all this. He's actually bad. We have graphics of him being compared to Daniel Jones and Mac Jones.
I'm looking at him right
Jones's
now, actually.
brothers. And Trevor Lawrence, I think he's actually like much better than the numbers would showcase. But for some reason, people think he just sucks. And I think that is in large part to the media pushing it. Richard Sherman, was pushing it on his show. Emmanuel Acho said he got paid for what he was at Clemson, not what he's been in the NFL. And yeah, I mean, I think he's gotten unfairly critiqued. I know the stats don't look good. 21 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, 88.5 rating. The Jaguars started 8-3. They finished 9-8. They missed the playoffs after a great start. But I think Trevor Lawrence has really been doing the best he can do with an underwhelming supporting cast. A terrible offensive line, underwhelming defense, no run game to speak of. And there is a compilation on Twitter of his receivers dropping 15 touchdowns. 15 touchdowns. And some people will look at that video and they'll still find a way to discredit him. They'll say, oh, you can do this for every quarterback in the NFL. But thankfully, we have stats that measure these kind of things. And Trevor Lawrence was the number one quarterback in terms of EPA lost to drop passes in 2023. This is from the 33rd team. They make excellent football content. Yeah. Number 2 was Matthew Stafford. And number 3 was Patrick Mahomes in terms of EPA loss to drop passes. And Stafford was at 32. Mahomes was at 32. Trevor Lawrence is at 38. A negative 38 EPA loss due to drop passes. And if you look at their passer ratings, Mahomes this past season had a 92.6 passer rating. Stafford had a 92.5 passer rating. Lawrence's was an 88.5 passer rating, not too far off. And his receivers really struggled to catch the ball. On throws 10 plus yards down the field, he was ninth in accurate throw rate, but he had the 29th best completion percentage. The things that he's doing really well aren't showing up in the stats because his teammates didn't capitalize on them. And I think when you just watch him play, it's clear he's a top-end quarterback. I think he's one of the 10 best quarterbacks. He's 10-ish around there. Most passing yards in his first 3 seasons, he's number 5 behind Herbert, Luck, Peyton, and Joe Burrow. People will mention the turnovers.
Saying everything. How am I going to say?
People will mention the turnovers, but in the last 3 seasons, he's number 1 in turnovers. But number 2 is Allen. Number 3 is Mahomes. Number 4 is Carr. Number 5 is Prescott.
He's dropping well numbers because, again, this is every talking point there is to have on Trevor.
These are 4 of the 5 better quarterbacks in the league, and I think this deal is right around his ballpark. And every time a quarterback gets paid, people are quick to call them overpaid. It didn't matter if it was Kyler Murray, Trevor Lawrence, Jared Goff, Jalen Hurts, even Joe Burrow when he got his contract, even though he proved everything he could prove.
Put Herbert in this conversation also.
Herbert, everybody got criticized. Criticized those quarterbacks when they got paid, but we're noticing right now that the smart teams are paying their quarterbacks earlier because the numbers just going up. When Arizona paid Kyler Murray, he was the number 1 contract in NFL history. After every other contract that has happened after him, he's now 10th in salary.
Now, let's go to the extreme. Mahomes got paid $502 million. I believe he's the 9th highest paid quarterback right now.
Yeah.
That is it. It's a lick.
I can't believe his agent did that, bro.
Yeah, Josh Allen's contract, his contract also looks very good now. So all these quarterbacks that are getting paid early, their contracts are looking very good.
Can I ask you a question? We're looking at that as a bad deal for Mahomes?
Yeah.
Imagine that. The richest contract in sports, not named Shohei Ohtani.
It's a terrible deal, actually.
It's a bad deal.
Yeah.
I got goosebumps. And I don't even like the guy. How fucking crazy is that? $502 million, and that's a bad deal. So what were we saying? That he should have got $800?
Should have got $1 billion.
Or I just, 10 years is crazy. Like, you know what I mean?
10
like,
years was dumb.
Like, why don't you sign a 4 or 5 year deal like everyone else does? You could still get 50 per year, but then in 3 years you could extend. You know what I mean?
You want to
like,
know why? And here, this is if we really want to go into the big picture of it. You sign him for 10 years, around $50 million a season, around that. The idea is the contract's going to age amazingly for the Chiefs. He has all of these brand deals. He's already in with some organizations as like a minority stake in some of these teams.
Prime.
He is loaded. He's gonna make so much off State Farm. Every one of these commercials he's getting paid for. He's gonna be a billionaire when it's all said and done. He's good. He's good regardless year to year. He's probably making more than $100 million a season. Mm-hmm. So if it's gonna help out the team and you're gonna be able to bring players to ultimately build a complete roster around him, which, I mean, he's been carrying a majority of this load offensively, and who knows what happens after Kelsey, God willing, fall off. Probably not. You know what I mean? He's shown that with minimal, we can win a Super Bowl. It's not just getting there. No, you can win the whole thing and beat elite teams there too. So it's going to age perfectly for the Chiefs. Mahomes is still going to be unbelievably rich, but it's crazy to think about now that we kind of shift to it. Let me respect Trevor. He's the one that just got paid just because he tied for most annual $55 million with Joe Burrow. I think the few names that did not get scrutinized when they got paid, Mahomes, Josh, Joe. Those are the only three. I'd never really heard any criticism on Joe because, again, you went to Cincinnati, terrible team for a good amount of years, did not win a playoff game for what, decades at that point. Now you bring him to a Super Bowl, you deservedly so got paid. Josh, the ascension that he took in year 3 on, of course you knew he was going to get paid. Mahomes, we don't have to talk about. Other than that, everyone else got criticism. Jalen Hurts got criticized. You're like, 1 year, we're automatically doing this, even though he was a top 2 MVP candidate, had all the stats, went to the Super Bowl, was elite. I think that of the great quarterbacks, he's the one that probably got shit-talked the least, but still did. Joe, no. Josh, no. And Mahomes, no. But other than that, you're going to get criticized because people want instant gratification. They want to see you go to the championship. They want to see you win. They want to see you have multiple accolades. Lamar also. Let me also throw Lamar in that group. He didn't get criticized, and deservedly so. 2-time MVP, amazing football player. But if you're not playing and translating into wins, automatically they'll call you overpaid. Jared Goff just got an insane contract. Obviously, he was going to get criticized. Tua is going to get his contract. I dread that show because it's going to be an hour of shit talking Tua. Even though the QB market naturally is going to get reset. Tua will be the highest paid quarterback when he gets his contract. Jordan Love will probably in a similar conversation. If they don't decide to pay him this offseason, next season he plays out of his mind, he's going to be right there with these guys. It's just going to happen. It's football. It's year to year that every player, it changes. We had the same conversation with Jaylen Brown when he got his contract and became the richest player in NBA history contract-wise. It's going to change. When it's your time and you're due, you're going to get your money. But Trevor Lawrence, I mean, you already listed everything. Top 5 in the first 3 seasons of a career when it comes to yards. Doesn't have the touchdowns to match, but obviously has shown to be a mobile quarterback. Also on top of it, is extremely accurate. Has one of the strongest arms. There's really not a throw on the field that this guy can't hit. There's just a burden that gets put on you when you go to a terrible team when you are the number 1 overall pick. The Colts weren't immediately amazing with Peyton Manning. I mean, you see Joe Burrow and he goes to the Super Bowl and they had a terrible situation. Immediately he comes in and they're playing winning football. But there were great moves made by front office that got them to that position on top of Joe Burrow being one of the main catalysts. But you draft Jamar Chase. You have T. Higgins from the year prior that you kind of stole in round 2. That was an amazing pick for them as a great counterpart to Jamar. The only thing that's lacked has been that offensive line, and even still, they're still waiting on that. For Trevor, your big moves were signing Christian Kirk, trading for Calvin Ridley. You've done nothing to help him in the offensive line until this past offseason, and even still. I mean, I feel like you would still want more. And receiver-wise, you just lost Calvin Ridley. You brought in Gabe Davis. And you drafted Brian Thomas, which obviously I'm a huge fan of. He could probably go in there and be tit for tat with Christian Kirk. I'm that high on Brian. But as a team, the number 1 overall pick, Trayvon Walker, we have to see how that ages. You have to be near perfect when you get a quarterback like that. We saw the Bengals be near perfect with that outside of the offensive line, but you got an elite weapon with Jamar Chase. It would have been hard for them to reach at pick 1, and you kind of justify it where you go with Drake London, Garrett Wilson, one of those types of receivers. But hindsight's so crystal clear, 2020, that Trayvon Walker, I always felt Aiden Hutchinson was the pick, so that way you would have gotten an impact player immediately on the other side of the ball where Trayvon's really taking him some time to get going. You have to be perfect, and the Jaguars haven't been. You use a first-round pick on Travis Etienne. I understand Travis Etienne's really good, but you have bigger needs than a running back, especially at the time. So to me, the front office for the Jaguars has to be better to put him in a better light for the public, because now there's unnecessary conversations being put on Trevor's name because of the situation that he's in.
I think the only contract that got scrutinized at the time and is right is Deshaun Watson. You trade for him, same day you give him 5 years, $230 million, fully guaranteed. That's with Russ too. But even when Russ got that extension, I don't think a lot of people were saying it's crazy because he was coming off a couple great seasons where he was regarded as like a borderline top 5 dude. Deshaun, on the other hand, hadn't played football in a full season. You knew he was about to get suspended for like a minimum of half the season. And on top of that, all of the off the field issues he had that we don't even have to get into, that all of just the personality, just human aspect that you're putting in all of this money and you don't even know if this dude's really a good human being at the end of the day.
True.
So he's really the only one that I think got scrutinized at the time. And we look at now and be like, yeah, that was a terrible decision, let alone the draft picks you gave up on top of that. So there's a stat for everything, of course. Adjusted EPA per play, taking into account pass protection, receiver drops, dropped interceptions, luck on interceptable passes. I don't even know how you fucking figure this out. Fumble recoveries, and interception returns. Brock Purdy, number 1 in EPA. Dak Prescott, number 2. Trevor Lawrence, number 3, over guys like Josh Allen, over guys like Patrick Mahomes, Jordan Love, Jalen Hurts, all of these dudes, CJ Stroud, who we regard as top 10 quarterbacks, Tua as well, in the NFL. It's a bit of beating a dead horse when we talk about Trevor Lawrence, because I feel like every time we have this conversation, it's all of the issues around him. And for someone who doesn't believe in Trevor Lawrence, the people out here who think he's overrated or thinks that he doesn't deserve this contract, I think a lot of people are just tired of hearing it. And I think that's fair. You know, this is year 3 of Trevor Lawrence, or excuse me, going to year 4 now. And coming into his NFL career, if you would have said his first 3 years, he's top 5 in passing yards, he won a playoff game, and on top of that, he overcame that first year with Urban Meyer, I think a lot of people are looking at his success. But since we're living in this moment and the Jaguars kind of underachieved last season, especially the previous year where they win a playoff game, they have the huge comeback at home, I think it's easy for a lot of people to kind of just be a bit lower on Trevor Lawrence, especially when the numbers, the raw numbers of last season, don't really back up what a lot of people, us included, say about him, that he's easily a top 10 talent in the league. He just doesn't really have the success or the numbers yet, but it's very difficult for any player, let alone a number 1 overall pick who's going into a terrible organization, to just turn it around like that. I mean, you're talking about guys like Andrew Luck and Joe Burrow who did it. And Burrow, it was really the second year, of course, coming off the ACL, he got injured, but it's very difficult to come in and immediately have success, immediately win playoff games, immediately go to Super Bowls and set records. That's why when we hype up Justin Herbert, who people still shit on and don't think he's one of the top 5 quarterbacks in the NFL, it's like, no, he absolutely is, because he came into the NFL and day 1, he comes in, he knows 30 minutes before the game he's about to start, and he goes out there and beats the Chiefs. And of course, he has 1,000 other things he's done that's great. So Trevor's been so good so early in his career outside of his rookie year, which nobody really holds against him at this point. If you're the Jaguars, I mean, what other choice do you have? You want to wait a year? It's going to be more expensive. You want to trade Trevor Lawrence? It's going to be probably your best quarterback in NFL history. It's a no-brainer. Congratulations to him, and they have a franchise quarterback.
And it's all about a leverage tactic, because you look at the people who haven't gotten paid yet. Jordan Love, Dak, Tua. I think Dak is waiting on everybody to get paid, along with the Cowboys having a tough dilemma because they have to extend Dak, Micah, and CD. And that's a lot of money for 3 players, and one of them is probably not going to be back. It's probably going to be Dak. I think Dak is going to be a free agent. Dak is waiting on those contracts because you look at his stats over the course of his career, his agent can negotiate that he deserves more than Tua and Jordan Love. I think Tua's waiting on it. Yeah, he waited on Lawrence because if you're Tua's agent and you're just looking at the numbers and negotiating,
Tua's been better statistically.
Yeah, it's like, why shouldn't Tua get more?
Mm-hmm.
And then if you're Jordan Love's agent, we're waiting to see what Tua's getting because whatever Tua gets, we could say, well, he got a playoff win and he did this. They're all waiting to see what's going to happen. And I think the Jaguars were smart in paying Trevor Lawrence early because the later you pay a quarterback, the more you're going to pay him. It's just as simple as that. I think that's what it comes down to right now.
Let me ask you, do you think people were talking about Phillip Rivers the way that they were talking about her is like the modern Phillip Rivers, Herbert, and Trevor Lawrence?
Let me say that.
Because Phillip Rivers was pretty fucking amazing. Never won.
Yeah.
You know?
They're so early in their careers. It's hard to say.
Because I look at talent-wise, what's stopping me from saying that Herbert can be top 5 quarterback for the rest of his career?
Nothing.
You know what I mean? Trevor Lawrence, top 10 quarterback, rest of his career. It's like there's a real possibility those two quarterbacks never win. And it's not because they're not talented. It's because, one, it's hard as fuck to win in the league. Aaron Rodgers has only won once, and in a lot of people's eyes, that's the most talented quarterback they've ever seen until Patrick Mahomes has obviously become this unbelievable talent. But my point being is Phillip Rivers was right there with Ben Roethlisberger, was probably better than Eli Manning, but never got the championship and never got his due diligence. You look at Herbert, you look at Trevor, they're on two organizations that are not good and have historically been bad. And it's going to take a lot for them to really put themselves in a position to even compete for a championship. And it really is out of their hands for a majority of it. It's how much talent you're going to put around me. But these two guys, I think now that the Chargers, I think they're going to start to be on the right direction now that Harbaugh is there. And he's obviously a lot smarter than what's going on in Jacksonville. But there's a real possibility we look at these two guys. We sit and acknowledge these are two of the most talented quarterbacks we've ever seen, and they get slighted the rest of their career because they don't have a championship. Matthew Stafford got criminally underrated his entire career until he went to Los Angeles and won a championship.